Welcome back to the show. I've got to say something to you that you probably haven't heard recently. In 2025, the black church is a joke.
Chicago area clergy are standing together to resist what they're calling the Trump takeover of Chicago.
The White House plans to send in the National Guard, still largely unknown where and when. Eric Wrong is at Federal Plaza with more on this story. Eric?
Well, good morning. The faith community here says the National Guard is not wanted and it's not warranted, and they are urging President Trump to rethink his plans.
Today we stand at the doorsteps of the federal building, not as agitators, but as ambassadors of justice.
For the third time this week, a group gathers at Federal Plaza to say no to deploying the National Guard to Chicago.
It is deeply disturbing and frustrating that a sitting president would dare override the duly elected leadership of our city's mayor and our state's governor.
Today, it's Live Free Illinois, along with clergy from the Chicago area and other faith-based organizations.
You know, when I was growing up, my father died when I was 7 years old. He actually died in 1981. I was born in 1973, so I was only 7 years old when he died. So it was my mother, me, and my sister. And I tell this joke often that my mother made us go to church 8 days a week. But we were in church all the time, and we went to a Southern Baptist black church. And I have to tell you, what churches did in the black community in the 60s, the 50s and the 60s, was completely different from what they are doing today. And I have to be honest, I've been very disappointed in what the black church has done in the black community in the last generation, and today it is no exception.
We declare that Chicago is not a war zone.
It doesn't matter what you declare. That's what you hear in these modern churches. We declare and prosperity preaching, and all you have to do is name it and claim it. I cannot tell you how disappointed I am in the church today. When you go back to the 50s and the 60s, to the days of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and to that generation, they understood that the church had a role in influencing what's going on politically. But today, you don't see that.
The facts speak to this reality. The real criminal is the convicted felon living in public housing at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C.
It's still unknown whether President Trump will follow through on his threat to deploy the National Guard to patrol the streets of Chicago, which he calls a hellhole and killing field. His press secretary yesterday again went after Chicago and the governor.
We've been seeing the governor of Illinois parading out there saying that there's nothing wrong with Chicago. It's a great place to live. There's no crime there. He doesn't need President Trump's help. Well, I think the residents of Chicago beg to differ, and the statistics beg to differ.
I'm actually going to put a link to the end of this video to another video that I just did that talks about what's going on in real time on the ground in the city of Chicago. You can listen to the governor. You can listen to Mayor Brandon Johnson. You can even listen to all of these mayors of all these blue cities all around the country who are saying crime is down and there's nothing going on. But those statistics are not being accurately reported. And if you're a person who's walking on the ground in these blue cities, you know that crime and the statistics that are being reported are not being reported accurately. But I don't want to ignore what's going on when you see all of those black clergy who are down there in City Hall or down there in Chicago who are saying they're going to take a letter to the city and they're going to insist that the city resist Donald Trump coming into the city of Chicago with the National Guard.
The president, and let's talk about the press secretary for the president, doesn't seem to understand that it's actually Republican states that have the crime problem. That of the 20 states that have the biggest crime problem, 13 of them are red states controlled by Republican governors.
That's the other lie that I hate to hear being repeated over and over again. If you look at the red states, it's the blue cities in those red states where you see the most crime. If you look in the state of Missouri, red state, but where do you see the most crime? Kansas City and in St. Louis, blue cities. You go down to New Orleans, where do you see the most crime? It's a red state, but you see the crime in New Orleans. That's a blue city. You go down to Mississippi, red state, where do you see the most crime? Jackson, blue city. You go down to Alabama, red state, where do you see the most crime? Birmingham, blue city. You go to Texas, red state, where do you see the most crime? Houston, blue city. They continue to tell this lie, but here's the one contiguous theme that you see going on throughout the country, is that wherever you go, whether it's a blue state and a blue city or a red state and a blue city, it's democratic governance that is permissive towards crime and antisocial behavior where you see the most crime.
Now, after today's press conference, some members of the clergy walked over to the federal courthouse here behind me and delivered a letter to the U.S. Attorney expressing their views. They also plan to continue preaching this message all weekend long. We're live at Federal Plaza.
Well, it's so good that the clergy, the black churches, are going to the actual, it's so good that you see the clergy going to the Attorney General from the state of Illinois with a letter, and they're insisting that the state resists Washington, D.C. and the president sending in the National Guard to try and save black lives in Chicago. Because we know these black churches, that's all they concern themselves with. Their number one priority is to safeguard black lives. That's all they concern themselves with. They don't just go out at Thanksgiving or at Christmas and give out turkeys and give food. They're doing things year round. These black churches, their number one priority is the safety of black neighborhoods. But take a look at this.
Two church leaders with ties to Tampa are facing federal charges tonight. They're at the center of what investigators are calling a multi-million-dollar conspiracy involving money laundering, forced labor, and abuse. This follows multiple FBI raids this morning, including at a home in the affluent Avalon neighborhood in Hillsborough County. This was part of a nationwide takedown. Fox 13 is covering this investigation from multiple angles. Our Kylie Jones is at the federal courthouse in Tampa, diving deeper into the church and its leaders. But we begin with Aaron Mesmer live in Avila with more on the raid and reaction from neighbors. Aaron.
I want you to take a really good look at that lower third. Church leaders are being accused of forced labor. And I can tell you, as someone who grew up in the church, who worked in the church, throughout my early adulthood, churches survive on volunteers. Most of the people who work in churches, if you're an usher or if you're singing in the choir or on the praise team or if you're helping park cars, if you're a janitor, 99% of the people who work in churches, they are volunteers. They're doing it and they're not being paid. So I want you to take a close look at what's going on with one of these mega churches, with one of these black pastors down in Florida. And go back to that thumbnail that I opened up with where I showed you the picture of the church and I juxtaposed that against the picture that you just saw of the parsonage where the pastor lived. Take a look at that. Keep that in the back of your mind and keep looking at this.
Yeah, Haley, and these neighbors were absolutely stunned by what went on this morning. Neighbors in this community, they woke up to helicopters and FBI agents raiding a home in Avila. And once they found out why those federal agents were there, it was even more surprising.
Some of you say, I don't have 100,000, but you have 20,000. You have 50,000 here, or you have 10,000.
Listen to that pastor. He's talking to people online and saying, maybe you don't have a $100,000 seed to sow, but maybe you have 10 or 20 or 50. But think back to that house where this pastor is living.
That's video of David Taylor asking viewers to send money to his church. Federal authorities now say Taylor used donations to fund an extravagant lifestyle.
Take a look at that house. Take a look at that house and think back to the thumbnail on this video. That house is bigger than the church where he was actually having his parishioners come and serve. But keep listening.
That included this massive mansion in Tampa's affluent Avila community. FBI agents raided the home Wednesday morning.
It's very surprising to hear that type of thing was going on again right in your backyard.
It's unclear what authorities took from the home. This view from Skyfox.
See those 4 cars sitting there on that property with the bows on them? Someone was going to get blessed with one of those cars. Someone was going to be given one of those cars, and it was going to be an answer to their prayers. But let's not disaggregate this from how this video opened. You've got these black pastors who are going down, and they are resisting the entreaties of Washington, D.C. and Donald Trump, who's saying, I want to send the National Guard to save lives in the city of Chicago. It would seem as though these pastors, that would be the #1 thing with which they'd be concerned, saving lives and saving souls. But they don't care about that because the person who's offering the help is the wrong person.
Shows several cars lined up with gift bows on top. Neighbors say the 10-bedroom, 10.5 bathroom, 28,000 square foot mansion is one of the largest in Avila.
Did you hear that? 10-bedroom, 10.5 bath, 28,000 square foot home where the pastor lives.
It was like, how could a pastor afford to live in a house like that?
According to the 23-page federal indictment, this house is one of several properties throughout the country purchased by Taylor's Kingdom of God Global Church. He's the pastor.
One of several homes that he owns throughout the country. And these are the people who are going down there when they should be trying to save the lives of their parishioners. Because it's Donald Trump that's sending the National Guard, they are 100% against it. They want to send a letter to the Attorney General and say, do not accept help from this man. They don't care about saving your life. They don't care about saving your soul. When you look at this pastor and you look at the several homes he owns throughout the country, and how did he afford that? What's the only way that churches take in money? The only way they take in money is through the collection plate. And that money is untaxed. So then they can take that money and go buy a mansion. You just heard that woman say that house where this pastor was living was one of the largest homes in Avila, Florida. Think about that. One of the largest homes. That house is bigger than the church that he's supposed to be saving souls from. And these are the people to whom we're supposed to be living. I mean, think about this for a minute. This is the house where the actual pastor was living, but this is the church that he was preaching out of. Which one is bigger?
And referred to himself as an apostle, according to court documents. The indictment alleges Taylor recruited people to work at call centers, referring to them as armor bearers. Investigators say they were his, quote, personal servants who fulfilled Taylor's demands around the clock.
And that's another word you have to look out for, especially in black churches, when they call you an armor bearer. You're supposed to be the person who's supposed to be praying for and looking out for the pastor. And you're supposed to be interceding and making sure that you're praying for him so he can be protected. But look at this pastor. Look at his mugshot. This pastor was taking in, just listen again.
And were never paid. Taylor and Executive Director Michelle Brannon are accused of controlling nearly every aspect of the workers' lives, cutting them off from family and forcing them to take contraceptives. Human trafficking advocates say it's a devastating situation.
That particular pastor is accused of human trafficking, keeping people from their families, punishing them for, by not letting them eat, subjecting them to all sorts of torture. And then when they didn't hit the goals that they were supposed to be hitting, you know what? Just take another listen.
You really had every aspect of human trafficking. You had individuals who were, brought to a facility that they couldn't leave. They weren't being paid. They had production goals that they had to meet.
And authorities say
Of course they weren't being paid. Listen, if you are a churchgoer and you're listening to this video right now, tell me how many people get paid in a church, especially a black church. You don't get paid to sing in the choir. You don't get paid to be an usher. You don't get paid to be a member of the praise and worship team. If you're working in some of these larger churches and you're working in the bookstore or you're working to sell media, you're not getting paid. It's the expectation is placed upon you that you're supposed to give your time, your talent, and your treasure to the church, and you're convinced that it's all for the kingdom of God. But ask yourselves, let's be really honest right now. Ask yourselves, how is all of your work that you're doing voluntary, but the pastor and the pastor's secretary and a couple of people who work for the church, they're living in these opulent mansions, and oftentimes they're serving communities that are living in poverty. You've got single mothers and you've got people who are living in meager circumstances who are taking the very, very last that they need to the church under the guise that you'll be blessed later. But then you take this money in to the church and you've got these pastors living in mansions, in multiple mansions throughout the country.
The workers failed to reach Taylor's monetary goals. They faced punishment, including public humiliation, food and shelter restrictions, sleep deprivations, and physical and psychological abuse.
Listen to what that purporter just said. Sleep deprivation, public humiliation, not being fed, not being given any water. You're going to be subjected to this type of punishment because you didn't hit the pastor's monetary goals, and oftentimes they're going to tell you you didn't hit those monetary goals because you didn't have enough faith. I mean, this is what people are doing to innocent, gullible, simple-minded individuals, and those individuals, the only thing they're trying to do, they're trying to find some level of happiness, some level of completion, so that they can purportedly get themselves to a higher level spiritually, and they can have a better contact with God. But all the while, they are being mentally and physically abused, so these pastors can control them and convince them that what they're doing is not for the pastor, it's for God.
Crisis Center of Tampa Bay's CEO says these victims will likely face a long recovery. She says there's another lesson every community can learn from this.
This can happen in one of our most affluent zip codes in Hillsborough County. It can happen in your backyard. It can happen in my backyard.
As for the folks who lived with alleged human trafficking, fraud, and money laundering,
think about that. Human trafficking and fraud is the accusation against this pastor. Think about that. Think about that for a second. Human trafficking and fraud is the accusation against this pastor. Take a look at this dude. Who is listening to this man and telling themselves that this is the man who is their spiritual leader, who is holding the keys to where their soul is going to spend eternity? Whether or not that's even true or not, but these individuals are taking, these types of pastors at these megachurches are taking advantage of people, and I, for one, am glad that the law is there to hold them accountable.
Happening in their backyards.
I hope it's not true, but if it is, he deserves everything he's going to get.
And there was also what appeared to be a federal command center set up just north of here at St. Joseph's Hospital in Lutz. Experts say if there were any human trafficking victims at this property, they likely would have been taken to a nearby hospital for care. Haley?
Until they can...
So here's the bottom line. We've got Brandon Johnson and we have black politicians all throughout the country who are resisting Donald Trump and what he's trying to do for... So here's the bottom line. We've got black politicians, black mayors and state senators and people all over the country who are resisting Donald Trump, and they are saying, hey, we're not going to trust Donald Trump to come into our communities because he's not doing it in good faith. He's disingenuous. He's just doing this because he has an agenda, and after all, he's obviously a racist. This is what these politicians are saying. But over the last 2 weeks that the National Guard has been deployed in Washington, D.C., you've had 0 deaths, you've had 0 carjacking. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, even if you don't like the messenger, if the message is good, shouldn't we accept the message? If Donald Trump sends the National Guard to Chicago and it works, and fewer or 0 people die, fewer or 0 people get carjacked, fewer or 0 people are subjected to crime, who cares about Donald Trump? Why aren't we more concerned about the possibility of lowering crime? And if Democrats have the answer, then why don't you go ahead and say, hey, Donald Trump, we don't need your help because we have a better solution. I am so frustrated. I am so disappointed that everything we talk about boils down to race, party, and class. You've got black pastors in the city of Chicago who are performing these stunts to try and go down and pray and protest and do whatever they're doing. But guess what? These are the pastors who are operating in these cities and operating in these neighborhoods in Chicago. Their praying and protesting hasn't worked because we're still seeing these high levels of violence. I say, until Democrats and these black pastors in these black urban inner city neighborhoods can come forward with a plan that actually works, we're going to take help from wherever we can get it, because the most important thing in this whole situation is not party, it's not race, it's not class, it's about saving lives.